know. Keep 2 meters apart. What I have heard from medical experts, these are the things we know that prevent you from speaking moistly. Speaking moistly. Keep 2 meters apart. Speaking moistly.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new edition of Speaking Moistly. With me with me for the first time, actually, is Jason Lavigne. Jason, welcome to Speaking Moistly. Thanks for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. I love the name of the show, by the way.
Yeah, well, I mean, ridiculous. We were talking in the green room very briefly about all of the crazy things that have happened in Canada. And I mean, Speaking Moistly was coined when Justin Trudeau was hiding in the cottage and telling all of us to lock down our economy while he spent us into this inflationary nightmare that we are currently in 4 years later. So yeah, I don't know. I thought it was kind of funny. And you know what's funny? Like Greg and I, do you know Greg Wycliffe?
Yes. He's been on my show a couple of times.
Oh, good. Greg and I have done this show for a long time, and we haven't done it very often, very consistently the last little while, last year and a half, but it got pretty popular. And then if you went to YouTube trying to look for it, like Speaking Moistly, it would bring up the song, the remix, a whole bunch of other people referencing Speaking Moistly. Even if you put Speaking Moistly, Mark and Greg, it would be like the fifth or sixth one, like after you scroll. I was like, wow, they do not want this show out there. Because Greg and I are skeptical about the things that we're being told. And we have been skeptical for a long time. And yeah, I just feel like, and there were other hosts, but Greg was the usual one, but we haven't been doing it very often anymore. So it's nice to shake off the dust and get things going again. You and I were talking about how it's interesting in the landscape of, well, you do news out of Alberta, and you are doing, focusing on very interesting, like the Coots guys and other really difficult, crazy cases and situations that are happening specifically in Alberta, but broader Canada as well. And it's difficult to, on the right, discuss what's happening without getting into a fight with people, right? It's really weird. You blocked me because we got into something. There was some drama going on, and we didn't talk for years. This is the first time we've ever talked in person at all, ever. And so it's just interesting how people who would be aligned, fighting for the same thing, are stymied by, I don't know what it is, but it seems like we're not able to get on the same page. And so when we're not on the same page, people like Justin Trudeau are able to run everything that they're doing, and we are off in the corners fighting on a censored internet while they censor the internet further. And that seems weird. Like, what do you think about all the infighting on the right about everything?
Well, I prefer to call it friendly fire because we're in war. We're in war. So we're out there doing our best, trying to identify the enemies and deal with it. And from time to time, and I can speak for myself on this one, I was hypersensitive. I've definitely, got a little bit more thicker skin, but I was hypersensitive for quite some time there. And it wasn't that I was trying to avoid conversation or debate. I didn't know what the difference was at one point. It just all was coming at me pretty harsh that I wasn't sure what was friendly and not. But I think because on our side, we absolutely hold people accountable. It's built into us. That's exactly how we function. And we're skeptics too. So when you put those two things together, friendly fire is going to happen often. Yeah. I would prefer that, to be honest with you, because if we were the other side where they just like drones just follow the drumbeat and do whatever they're told without even using their own logic or reason, then I would prefer not to have that on our side. So things like blocking friends and people that are normally aligned quite well will happen because we're trying to hold people accountable, and we are skeptical. But I think what we're starting to learn here is how to tolerate and then maybe get past the feelings portion of it, because my feelings may have been hurt by a post you did there, asking a question, and if you just worded it in a certain way, it feels accusatory even if that's not its intention, and then emotional response to it. So sometimes we're sensitive, but because we actually care, right? So we are not desensitized to the world. We're very sensitive to the world, and we also hold each other accountable. So it's going to happen. What I'm very pleased about, though, is exactly what you've demonstrated here, is you kind of alerted me to it. Someone posted and said, hey, I like this Jason guy. And you said, I would too if it wasn't for the blocks. And like, oh, well, I've taken all my blocks off, my bad. And now here we are. I'm on your show having a conversation. So our ability to also get past it and
Learn.
go, okay, yeah, my bad. I made a mistake. Let's move on. And then your ability to accept the apology and move on. I think that's also a beautiful part of our side. You don't see that on the other side. We don't cancel each other, but we are willing to talk.
Well, I mean, I've been blocked by Ezra. You've been blocked by Ezra. I don't know. There's a bit of canceling there. So like I've been doing my show for a while. I started in 2018, and between 2018 and 2021, well, late 2020, I guess, I would always hear from the Rebel people, new Rebel reporters, people would message me saying, hey, I work for Rebel. We talked about your show this morning in our meet and greet or whatever. And I thought that was interesting. And like, I thought we're naturally aligned. And when October 7th happened, I said, I choose Canada. I don't choose Israel or Palestine or Gaza or anything like that. I choose Canada. We should stop funding this war. And also the history does not start on October 7th. And Ezra blocked me for that. I think that's what he blocked me for. I don't think that there was anything else that I've done or said that could be the reason for the block. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people just don't like me. That's fine. They don't have to like me. But I think that it's interesting that all of these foreign things, like I have some very, very big concerns about the money that's just going wasted on NGOs, on billions of dollars a year, on hundreds of billions of dollars a year on this kind of stuff. But we send money to fund foreign wars. And then we've got an alternate news outlet like Rebel News, who does great work sometimes. Like there's some stuff that I'm like, wow, man, I don't know if anybody's covering this in Canada. Nobody's paying attention to this. Great job. But then on the other side, it's like, listen, like history does exist. It doesn't, it's not that difficult to look up. And we shouldn't, in Canada, we shouldn't be saying we're going to spend our taxpayer dollars on this foreign war for any reason. I don't think there's any justifiable reason. Even if we were super rich and like everybody had free education, everybody had, 10-cent gas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even if that was the case and we had so much money coming out of our ears, I still don't think we should send money to fund foreign wars because that's probably a really bad idea. Because those people who you're funding the war against might hold a grudge and then all en masse move to your country and then change the whole culture of your country. It might happen. I'm just saying. So it's weird. I think that that's a really strange situation. And so like I've been dancing by myself for a lot of the time. And I mean, I have Greg on, I do interviews. I have done interviews, got you on now. And that's interesting. I'm interested in doing more, but I find it interesting when you've got this pillar of like Canadian B media and they're like, listen, it's the only way to think about alternate media is how Rebel does it. And if you say history starts before October 7th, 2023, well, you're blocked. And that's so weird. It's so weird because we should have the conversations. And if they're wrong, maybe, I don't know, change their position. But I think there are other influencing factors there we don't have to get into. But what do you think?
Well, I think it's a free open market. So if news organizations are going to take a position or have a bias, well, then that's on them and the market's going to respond to that. And it does give us opportunities like you and me to go ahead and fill the void when the market isn't doing it. Mm-hmm. So look, go ahead and block people, go ahead and take a position, go ahead and fight for a side. I think we need that, but it won't be the free market that's going to assist you on that one, because the free market's going to see what you're doing. They're going to take their position. And unfortunately, I do think that Rebel has some of the Rebel, not all of them, have taken positions that have been divisive. And when you do that, you're going to get division. Mm-hmm. So, and that's going to affect the bottom line. And in my opinion, I think that would actually create a spiral. I'm a pilot, so I like to use analogies like that. It will create, hold on, I got somebody joining me? Nope. To create a spiral, which is, well, once you get into that division, you have less support, and then more division, less support, and then eventually you get to the point where the free market has spoken, and you're going to be challenged to continue to be a news organization. And we might be seeing that right now. Yeah, unfortunately.
The problem, I agree with you to an extent, except that if you're the rebel, if you're rebel, or if you're a truth telling, if you so say that you're a truth telling, you represent that you're trying to be a truth telling organization, and then you take this hard line and you push that off, and you don't tell the truth about this specific thing. You know what I mean? And then also, the broader media has a similar line. You know what I mean? They're telling the same mistruth. It's difficult when you've got everybody lockstep, to use a term that's been thrown around a lot lately, reporting the same inaccuracies. It seems like it's on purpose. And so how do you fight that? When you say, listen, like you said at the beginning of the show, we're at war, we're in a conflict right now. I agree with you 100%. I think that we are in a conflict. And I think part of the problem with what the West is doing is that we are not behaving as if we're in a conflict. Our government is behaving as if like Ukraine is the conflict and Palestine and Israel is the conflict, when really the conflict is here, and it's our government versus the citizenry of this country. And we can't talk about that. All we can talk about is a very managed conflict in Israel. And if we talk about it wrong, you're going to get blocked by New York Times, by the Ottawa Citizen, by Rebel News, everybody up and down, A and B media, right? And if you talk about that, you get sidelined. And so like I've been sidelined, and that's okay. I don't mind being sidelined. It's like I don't care about the stats or the metrics or anything like that. I just want to read people in on what I think is happening because we're being lied to. So it's difficult. It's difficult to have an honest conversation with, I mean, to use the term normies is kind of difficult, but people who are not as awake as you and I, it's difficult because they're going to say, well, look at what the Ottawa Citizen says. Even Rebel News says blah. And you're like, well, yeah, okay. But if you look into it for half a second, there's more to this story and nobody's paying attention to it. Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges out there because what is the truth? Okay, there's people that have their version of the truth. Yep. And I can give you a small example. When covering the Coutts matter, if I took a position that the government was bad, prosecutors are bad, there's nothing but injustice here, and every single step of this process is wrong and not what we should be doing, I'd have a huge audience because that's exactly what they want to hear. But when I go in there and say, well, there's a couple things here that we got to highlight because, you know, the men did do some things, like they did bring firearm down there. If you even venture towards the actual truth, well, you get shut down because now you're not using the narrative. Believe it or not, there's narratives on all sides.
Yes.
And if you're not aligned to narrative, then all of a sudden you're an enemy. And I do find that right now we have a struggle on what is the truth and whether or not Canadians really want it. As somebody who's trying to build my little nest egg here, I'm trying to build something here so I can support my family. I've had to make decisions many times now. Am I going to be a narrative replicator or am I going to search for the truth? Because if I'm going to be a replicator of the narrative, I can grow a huge audience and I could do well.
Yeah.
And that was very clear to me. Very, very clear to me.
Yep.
But if I'm going to go for the truth, the only people I'll attract are the ones who are also searching for truth. And unfortunately, that isn't the majority.
No.
The majority likes to have their team, likes to have their side. Like when you look at a hockey team, there's 5 players plus a goalie, but there's only 2 or 3 refs, and nobody's cheering for the refs. Nobody's cheering for the ones that are trying to keep it all fair.
Yeah.
Right. You don't have a section in that stadium that goes, go referees. That never happens. But they're the ones who are there for the purpose of truth. They're trying to do their best for the truth. We don't have that. And I find that to be part of the challenge too. So news organizations basically have to, for survival, find a way to navigate that. And sometimes it's very tempting to just align with a narrative because there's a very large audience when you do that.
Yeah.
And some news organizations search for the narratives and align with it in order to gain audience. I can't do that.
Yeah. The refs aren't playing the game though.
No.
And so like I understand and by extension,
and neither should we.
The news shouldn't be playing the game either. But we're in a situation where the news media is bought off by the government to influence the game. You know what I mean? And so like they're parroting, and like as you said, the narrative. They're parroting that narrative line. And so like it's very, very difficult. Again, when you say the teams themselves have their narrative. So when Justin Trudeau came in, he was saying, Canada's racist. And everybody was like, no, they're not. I remember on my show, I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing. Like, you're trying to tell us in Canada that we Canadians are racist. That's the most ridiculous thing. And then he made that true. He assigned Islamophobia people and Islamophobic and anti-Semitism people, and basically said, if you are white, then you're racist, and everybody else is oppressed by you and your whiteness. And if we could get rid of that, that's totally not racist. And so he made Canada racist against white people, basically. And now when he says Canada is racist, he is brought that truth to fruition in a way through lies and using the apparatus of the state to bring it to fruition. And now and like, I don't think the population believes it, although I've heard people regurgitate that crap to me, and then I laugh in their face because it sounds like the most stupid thing in the world to blame racism for your own shortcomings or your own dissatisfaction with your life. But so neither here nor there. But now we've got a situation where, can political parties declare the truth, or are they communicating a truth? And if more people see that truth as true, they'll gain audience. So like, basically what I'm saying is there something as abject truth? Or do we just need as many facts as possible and like, instead of saying we need to get to the truth of it, forget the truth of it. F the truth of it. I don't care about the truth of it, because your truth might be different than my truth. I see these facts, you see these facts. Your truth conclusion is different than my truth conclusion. F the truth. I want to know the facts. Give me the facts. Is that person on bail? Is this person an illegal citizen who shouldn't be here? How many times have they been in jail? Give me the facts. Don't give me the truth. Don't give me your conclusion, because that's where we're being played, I think. Does that make sense?
It does. And that's one of the things I learned being a journalist is what is the truth. And you start to learn very quickly that perspective and experiences also play a factor in that. Let me just give you a small example. I think it was on Timcast. One of these examples came up where I'm in a forest with you. We're facing each other. And between us, there's a stick on the ground. And to you, it looks like a 9. To me, it looks like a 6. Well, what's the truth?
Right.
Well, the truth
is it a 6 or a 9? Yeah, right.
No,
yeah.
The truth is it's a stick.
Right, of course.
It's not a number, but because you saw it as a number, I see it as a number. Suddenly, the truth has now been changed. It's not a stick anymore. It's a number. Now let's argue about it.
And the worst part of it is, to extend your analogy, is the newspaper will pick it up and say, Niners are dumber than anybody in the world, blah, 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 blah. If you see a 9, you're an idiot, blah, 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 all this stuff. And they'll go into this. And then all of a sudden, all the people on Twitter, all the narrative pushers on Twitter will pick it up and say, oh yeah, the anti-vaxxers thing. I got called an anti-vaxxer early on. And I couldn't believe it was a smear. I was like, are you joking? Like, ha, 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 that's funny. What? Anti-vax? Before 2020, if somebody, like we rented a house when I was a kid. My parents were landlords, and actually it was my grandparents who were landlords. Rented the house, and the people who rented it, they lived there for years, and they didn't vaccinate their kids. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody talked about it. Only reason I knew is because I went over to the house to play video games one time, or a couple of times. Like, we were friends with the kids, right? And they were talking about, I can't even remember what they were talking about, but something that they weren't vaccinated for. Nobody seemed worried about it. I mentioned it to my parents. My mom was like, oh, well, all kinds, blah, 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 blah. No problems at all. There wasn't like, oh, you're never going there again. I'm worried about your safety. It wasn't anything like that. It was just like, oh yeah, did you know? And then there was this big push between like the 2000s and the 2010s. Penn and Teller did a whole thing about how great vaccines are and all this stuff. And it's insane how people were, in a very short period of time, brainwashed that this smear was worthwhile. And now we're worried about anti-vaxxers and racists. Like, while we have tent cities in the country, what the hell is happening? And like the fentanyl deaths are through the roof. How? So we are arguing that 6 and 9 to our death, right. And we don't see it. We don't understand it. Like, you and me are standing there saying, it's a stick. You fucking idiots. It's a stick. Like, stop it. Right. And we can't. And I feel like that with January or October 7th. I feel like that with COVID. I feel like that with the 2020 election in the United States. I feel like that with the BC election. People are saying the Nova Scotia election is not above board, but I don't know about that. But the BC one is absolutely effing crazy. I feel like that with Danielle Smith. I feel like that with Jason Kenney. I feel like that with Doug Ford. Like, what the hell are you doing? Like, there's obvious things here, and you're standing here going, oh, well, that says 9. And you're just like, it's insane. It's insane. So it's very difficult to deal with because, again, getting everybody on the same page. You were saying earlier, the other side, the left, doesn't tolerate any kind of wrong think, I guess. They have their ideology.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So they don't tolerate any kind of deviation at all. And on the right, the problem is, if I have my idea of how things are, and I articulate it, and I do, and I have some controversial opinions about things, which is fine. I think everybody can have their own opinion about whatever. People will attack that, and it's like, well, your opinion doesn't matter. And I'm like, it's not even opinion. I'm just telling you what happened. Here's the fact.
Yeah, if you ask Grok about me, it says I'm a controversial journalist. Controversial. Controversial to the mainstream, maybe, because I'm not doing what they say, but not controversial in a traditional sense where I'm looking for controversy. Just having the opposing view is considered controversy now instead of opposition. It used to be a healthy thing to have opposition because, iron sharpens iron. Like when you have debates and you work out issues, you actually educate both sides.
Yeah.
We used to have opposition and we used to encourage it. Now we don't have that. Yep. I think with the Me Too movement, the cancel culture that kind of kicked in early 2000s.
That was manufactured, but I agree with you.
It was, but I think it came in on what you would call like a good thing. It's a good thing that we're talking about.
They want it. Okay, well,
they sold on this story here.
So it wasn't just this guy that was saying it. Lil Rod, the former producer.
Sorry about that. Some audio started to play. Jason was saying that the Me Too thing was supposed to be brought in as a good thing, and it was manufactured. It was never actually a good thing. But then you started explaining like the next steps where the cancel culture was grown out of the Me Too. And I think that was always the goal. It was never actually something to protect people. Look at the Diddy parties. They knew what they were doing and they were like, oh, Me Too, Me Too. And it was bullshit all the time. Their goal was to get to the cancel culture, which go ahead, outline now.
Correct. And I think the ultimate goal there was to eliminate innocent until proven guilty and due process. And if you take both of those off the table and you allow culture to go ahead and say, okay, we don't need to do this innocent thing first, and we don't need to prove any guilt. Let's just go ahead and say that was bad and cancel you. Lose your job, lose your livelihood, sometimes lose your life too. When society allowed that to happen, and we didn't push back hard enough on that, because it would have been hard to be anti-Me Too.
Yes.
Like that's why they took that subject. It would have been hard to be anti-Me Too, even if you were right about due process.
Yes. They use subjects like that on purpose because then if you say we shouldn't be doing this, somebody's like, what, you're against women? You hate women?
Correct. Right? Yeah. Correct. They're not smart or not dumb, these people that are doing this.
No.
And when culture allowed that and we said, yeah, let's do that. Let's Me Too these and the hashtag and all that kind of stuff. That was, I think, culturally one of the worst mistakes we could make.
Yes.
I love the fact that we were going after bad people, but let's do it with innocent until proven guilty and due process so that we maintain that as a culture. When we dropped that, it became way too easy to cancel people and cause trouble. And unfortunately, males known this for a long time because there's a certain allegation that women can make against you that's very difficult to defend against. And that's why I think Me Too was identified by this global group to go ahead and divide us on that issue and then get rid of due process and innocent proven guilty. Taking those off the table made it easier for them to go ahead and push all other agendas.
And then they can just crucify you like they tried to crucify Kavanaugh, right? And I always say his name wrong. The justice, the Supreme Court justice.
Exactly.
They tried to basically try him in the press and destroy him in the press. Same thing with Donald Trump. Same thing with a whole bunch of right-leaning people. But I always say that if you are successful, like if you break through the censorship, if you are successful, like Donald Trump is successful getting through the censorship and whatever, then they take it. I think Tate was the one who talked about this. They take it up to the next level. But basically, if you break through all this censorship and people like you anyway, like they kind of like Trump, they will destroy you no matter what. They'll destroy your reputation. They'll shoot you in the ear and in an attempt to shoot you in the head, right? Like all sorts of stuff. They will destroy you. And when people start fighting this, and like you and me are fighting this, right? I was protested by Antifa when I ran for the PPC in 2019. Antifa came to a bunch of my different events, right? And so like you do not realize, you think to yourself, I'm going to stand and represent truth, or I'm going to stand and represent these facts that I believe to be factual or whatever. And then all of a sudden you get thrown into a dishwasher or a washing machine that has Antifa in it that's going to change what your intention of your words were to smear you with your audience and so many other things. And the number of people who come into this and do not understand that you represent, just by virtue of standing up, you represent a real threat to these people who want people who are asleep and puppets to represent them only. They don't want anybody, because a single person in there who understands this is all wrong can stymie their whole legislative process. Look at what Poilievre's doing, right now. And like, I don't know if he's our guy in that he's against the globalists. He's in charge of a globalist party, but his actions, nobody else has done what he's been able to do through procedure via shutting down the House of Commons. He's in charge of the House of Commons right now, which is interesting because there's that minority government thing going on. So like, it's all of that is interesting to me, and I don't know how to move forward with it. You know what I mean? It's just all this stuff that's like, oh man, shit. How do you deal with that?
It's difficult because what you're watching Pierre do a lot of, and look, this is not a bash Pierre thing, but what I've been noticing is he's executing on pandering. He's actually using pandering at this stage. And that worries me because I'm in a bit of an argument with a whole bunch of people on X today because I posted Gerald Soroka, my MP. He provided a message that the CPC are not going to touch the gun ban issue until after the election. They want to just leave it alone for now. And so I highlighted, like, look, we need to talk about this. But a lot of the pushback I'm getting is leave him alone because once he's in power, Pierre is going to go ahead and reverse all that.
And that's my concern.
I have to remind him, if he's pandering now to get the votes now, what makes you think that once he's in, he's not going to be thinking about the next election? He's going to be thinking about staying in power another 4 years. So all his moves after the election are going to be along that mindset because he's already proven to you before this election that he's willing to pander to get votes. So there's no way he's going to go pander election and then just go against everything that he was saying just a month ago.
Sorry, go ahead.
What we'll see is a light version of pandering, maybe. But I think he's always, with all his decisions, is going to be about the next election.
Yes.
He's always thinking about the next election. So there is no future where he's going to go in there and just change everything. Now, if we had term limits and he was on a second term and that was his last term, then maybe he would be able to do stuff like that because he's not thinking about the next election. But his party would. His party would make sure that, at least he's toting what the party believes needs to be done. So on those levels, I don't think we'll ever get a highly courageous PM unless it's outside of the normal party system, like the PPC or independent or something.
Indeed, I agree. One of the things that I was highlighting the other day on my show is that Poilievre and his rhetoric, it's it relies really heavily on slogans, right? Like the axe the tax, bring it home, back. All that stuff. And I don't hear that from Trump. And the stuff that Trump says, Trump's rhetoric. Now Trump's on his second term. He's not thinking about another election. So he's in a different mental state than Poilievre, I would think. But the rhetoric Trump is using to describe gender ideology and like the sex mutilation and all that stuff, the invasion that's going on, the mass deportations, all that stuff, make all the slogans that Poilievre's pushing like terrible. And I mean, Danielle Smith too. Trump says, listen, you can't change gender, stop mutilating people, and we're going to defund anybody who funds this at the hospital level. Like, if you do this, we're going to go after your license, we're going to go after the hospital's license, we are going to F you up. Not change your name at 16 and start surgeries at 18. Not that, Danielle Smith. What the hell are you doing? Like, do you think that a woman can become a man? Do you think a man can become a woman if they cut off the man's healthy sex organs? You insane person. Like, if you think that, you should be excluded from being able to be a representative, and not if the majority of people also agree with you. That's insane, right? Like, that's saying I believe I can fly. It's like, well, demonstrate it, not now. Like, give me a break, man. You're not a woman. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're not a woman, and that's the full stop. And I don't understand. Just the rhetoric on Trump's side, very clear. And we are going to protect our citizens from this insanity because it is insanity. There is no truth in this. It's false. And in Canada, they're like, yeah, you guys could be as crazy as you want. We'll pay for it once you're 18. Like, what?
Yeah, I know. There's double messaging coming out, and this is why I'm concerned. For example, Pierre voted for Bill C-4, which is the mutilation of children's bill. And I cannot see him.
Billboard Chris, who also blocked me, has highlighted a lot of the CPC people who are very problematic with regards to gender ideology across the federal government and provincial government. And like, he's done great work with regards to that. So, like,
yeah, and when it comes to the vaccine issue, we already know where Pierre stands. He wanted it faster.
He did.
To have it more.
He did. You know what's a weird thing? This is kind of going off of the topic. Not really. It's a little tangential aside. When Canada said they weren't going to take what was that one that you had Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca.
Johnson?
No, AstraZeneca. And because AstraZeneca was UK, they made that in the UK, and it was already harming people. Like they started injecting people, and it was already hurting people in the UK. The UK said we're not going to take this anymore, and then Canada said we're not going to take this anymore. And then do you remember what they did with the doses? I know what they did. I'm just wondering if you know. No?
They finished using them?
They sent them to the third world. They sent them to like Africa.
Oh, right. It was to help them.
And I was like, okay, so we know this is harming people. The United Kingdom has put in a situation to pay people out who have been harmed and or killed by this thing. And we're being amazingly generous by sending it to the third world. What in the hell? Like, I don't want to do that. That seems insane. Like, you're doing that on my behalf? You're using my tax dollars to pay for this AstraZeneca stuff and sending that to the third world? No, don't do that. That's terrible. That's like me having a hand in harming somebody that I have no ill will against. And if they come into the country and then harm somebody here, probably we deserved it. And I'm not saying that we deserve to be harmed or have violence against us, but our government is not acting on our behalf. It's not acting on my behalf. And like, not most people that I know. It seems insane to do that. So that's what they did with that. And that's the policy. Like, if we get into medications and things like that, if we don't want to use them anymore, we send them to poorer countries. And that's not great.
No, right? Not at all. And let's kind of remember part of the responsibility of the public to identify when they're being lied to. When the vaccine first rolled out, what were we all told? 2 shots, it will be done, right?
They didn't even mention the 2 shots until a few months later. But yeah, because I remember when they started announcing about boosters, and I was like, nope. But yeah.
But at the same time, so CBC reported on May 21st, 2021, so just at the beginning of all of this, that Canada ordered 400 million doses.
Yeah, 4 doses or 6 doses.
Million.
Yeah,
that's 10 doses for every man, woman, and child here.
Yep.
And they're building a factory in Quebec to do another 100 million.
Mm-hmm.
Well, did we all fail math? So they're telling us 2, maybe a booster later, but they've ordered 10, and they're going to make more.
Yep.
So very, very, very early, they knew about things like variants and trying to make sure that you need boosters. And that was whether it was part of the plan constructed, whether or not there was gain of function and all that kind of stuff, we can leave that aside.
Mm-hmm.
Just a simple fact that we were being told in the media, 2 doses, you'll be fine. But yeah, we ordered 10 for every single person.
Yep.
Why is the public so unwilling to even do the math on this one and push back?
But when if you did, I remember doing the math myself on the show and saying, like, that's, as you said, 10 doses for every man, woman, and child. Why would they need 10? Are they going to explode our population? Yes. But also, how many more of these are we supposed to take? If you brought that, it's the same block. What is it? The deny, diffuse, something else that got the CEO of the Health Network killed. Basically, it was a way to. You didn't hear about this?
I heard about him dying. The CEO just recently.
Yeah, but it's the same. He was the CEO who is putting in one of the doctrines of. There's 3 words. It's like deny, diffuse, something else, and the whole thing is they had a practice like the Event 201. You know, Event 201 just before COVID, right?
Right.
They had this practice thing about vaccines.
Depose. Deny, defend, depose.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it. Yes. And it's the same style of shutting things down. Like, if you why are you buying 10? They will use that doctrine to shut down anybody who brings that and is effective. They will use that style of counter. And they have whole war games, and they game out countermeasures. And they have like the smartest people in the room. I don't believe Hillary Clinton or Al Gore or any of these people are smart, but their assistants, the people they surround themselves with, their puppet masters, they are intelligent, and they are manipulating the public en masse in a way that is unbelievable. And the only thing weird about me and you, I guess, is that we can see it. I've talked to other people who seem very intelligent, and you like lay some of this stuff out for them, and they're like, oh no, that's not how like you're being manipulated. You think misinformation. It's like, no, dude, what? I don't know how you can look at the series of facts and come to that conclusion. You know what I mean?
I started seeing that trend in 2016 when Trump was announcing that he was going to run. I saw the Trump derangement syndrome.
Yep.
Really smart people in my world, lots of lawyers and other
doctors.
stuff.
I know.
Yeah, they suffered from it. It was like, dude, like, what are you saying? You're just replicating all of that.
Yeah.
So even earlier, I noticed that highly intelligent people were falling for narratives.
I used to work in schools, and I really, really like American politics. I mean, I like politics, full stop. And I think it's interesting. And before 2016, before Trump, I really liked American politics. I would watch Rachel Maddow. I would like all sorts of just things like that. And then Trump came in, and I started talking about, I was playing poker in the United States because I used to play poker too. And it was the acceptance speech. He'd won the DNC, he'd won the RNC, and he was accepting that, and he was moving into the broader race. And it was a big speech. And I was in Niagara Seneca Casino, and the speech came on. It was like 10 o'clock at night. The poker table that I was at almost emptied. People got up and left to go and watch Trump's speech. I was like, why are people leaving? They collapsed tables. So we had like 7 people left, and I was watching the speech because it had the captions and stuff. Right. And I was blown away by this. I came back, and I would talk politics with the administration team at the school that I worked at. So the principals, the vice principals, it was a high school that I worked at. So I'd talk politics with them, and I'd talk politics with them a lot of days. And I came down to the staff room at the morning break when we'd talk politics, and they were all there. And I was like, I was in the States playing poker. Everybody left to watch this thing. I think Trump's going to win. I didn't say I like Trump. I think that I want Trump to win. I didn't say anything like that. I just think Trump's going to win. I was uninvited from the conversation at that moment. No more. We're not talking to Mark. He's done. And I was like, there's another guy who wasn't in the administration, but he was like an alternate principal. Like if the principal wasn't there, he would be in the administration. So we talked too. And he was a teacher in like my hall. So I'd go out, and he was outside of his classroom. And I was like, I told him the same thing. I was like, I can't even believe it. But like people in the States are responding very differently than you think. And he was like, oh, that's interesting. And like cold shoulder, right? But yeah, like very, very smart people you think that would get it. And you're like, no, man. It's crazy.
That is interesting, because you didn't say, I want him to win. You said, I think he's going to win.
Yeah.
So you're giving an opinion. You're not even giving your desire.
Yeah.
You're not asking for him. You're just saying, I think he might win.
Yep.
That was enough to cancel you. I was in law school in 2016. So when that happened, so in our class, we even had a couple debates about, hey, if Trump wins, what's going to happen? Mm-hmm. I was the only one that was willing to say, I'm looking at the crowds. I'm looking at the numbers. I think the polls are lying.
Yeah.
And I actually think he has a strong chance of winning. But at this time, it was like 98% chance that Hillary was going to win. And everybody in the class, and I was in a very multicultural class. I was the only white male in that class.
Wow.
But I did stand up. And then I had other students come to me later saying, yeah, I think he's going to win too. Not that we wanted him to win, but he thinks he's going to win.
Yep.
That was enough to have the entire class turn on me.
Yep.
And then after the election, oh boy, they didn't like me. Like I was personally responsible for creating the President Trump.
Yes.
And I now needs to be chastised and ostracized within a law school of all places because I looked at numbers and I said, no, the polls are wrong, but the crowds and the other stuff does appear. He's got strong support.
So what you're describing, what we're talking about happened again in COVID, happened again. Like it is this training of the crowd, training of the society, the broader society, to respond to somebody who looks at the reality of the facts of things, not their opinion, not other people's opinion, just like the plain cold facts of it, and says, I think that everything, the 98% thing that you're saying, that sounds crazy. That's wrong. And they say, no, you're done. You're done. If you don't believe the narrative, you're done. And they cancel you. And I think that's their power. That's their only power. That's one of the main ones. But it's so intoxicating because so many people don't want to be called mean names. They don't want to lose their friends. They don't want to lose their family. Even if they're right, they'll swallow being right in order to maintain relationships. And like, that's on purpose. The powers that be know that. And so if they can get a society to hector people to the degree of you'll lose your job, you lose your friends, you lose your family, people will shut up. And like, they'll come, as you said, come quietly to you. And I mean, like I get emails all the time talking about like, you say the things that I can't say. And it's like, well, cool. But at the same time, the whole point is the censorship. The whole point is getting to a situation where they can, without any kind of opposition, speak their narrative and not have anybody say this is wrong. there's just one more thing I want to point out before I toss over to you. There was an experiment done, and the experiment had a bell being rung by the scientists. Okay, and there was 3 actors on the stage in the experiment room. So when the bell would ring, the actors would stand up. All 3 of them would stand up. They're sitting down, waiting to go into the experiment room, right? Because they don't know when the experiment's going to happen. So when the bell rings, they stand up. When the bell rings again, they sit down. And then they bring in the real people into this line of chairs. And then, they bring in 3 or 4 people and they start following along with the actors, right? And then another person comes in and they don't stand up and sit down. The censorship situation is removing that person who is spoiling it. Because if that person was allowed to stay, it wouldn't take very long for everybody else to stop doing the standing and the sitting. The only way they can win is if they silence us. The only way. And so that's why we're seeing the laws coming in for the censorship. That's why we're seeing these like soft censorship laws. And I hadn't connected the Me Too movement to the removal of due process, but I think that that's accurate, because like if you can crucify somebody in the public sphere and not worry yourself with the courts, it's a full win. You know what I mean? Like you've just destroyed them, and you don't have to waste any money on a lawyer or anything like that. You've just used your assets in the press. So it's super interesting that we are being manipulated to stay silent. And it's a linchpin. If we don't stay silent, and we didn't with COVID, right? People said, I'm not doing this anymore and you can't make me. And if somebody hectored you about a mask, you made fun of them, right? Like the tables got turned on them. They need us to buy in. They need us, majority of us, to tell other people to stop talking about it. So they desperately want to take us out. Like you, specifically you and me and people like us who keep talking about this stuff and saying what they're saying, 98% for Hillary Clinton, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. If you look at, nobody chants, we love you to a politician, but they did it for Trump in the 2016 election and in the 2020 election, and in 2020 and in 2024. They don't do that. You know what I'm saying? So if we look at the plain cold facts in front of us and say, these are the facts, and I don't believe your lies, now we get canceled. And like, it's so insidious and people don't see it. In fact, they only see what they're told to see. And it's so crazy. And I can't even believe it's true, other than the fact that we've just lived through 4 years of it. And it's undeniable. Like it's right in front of your face, but only some people can see it. That's so weird.
Yeah. And being afraid and taking action, it's not just humans, because there's another study out there that I paid attention to. They had a bunch of monkeys, and then it would drop a banana in. And of course the monkeys would run to it to try and eat the banana, but they would spray everybody with cold water. So as soon as a monkey touched it, all of them got sprayed. Then eventually all the monkeys stopped going to the banana. So as soon as the banana comes, they know if we touch it, we're going to get sprayed. Yeah. And then what they ended up doing is one by one replacing the monkeys with another one that wasn't around during the water stage. They weren't there. So they drop a banana, and that new monkey heads towards it. And what does the other ones do? They physically stop it because they know what's coming. Yeah. Then they continue this a little bit more, replacing another one, until all the monkeys that are now in that cage were never sprayed. They were all new to the occasion, but they were never sprayed. Yep. But yet they all still will stop the new monkey from chasing the banana. Yes. Now, what did we learn from that? Well, none of those monkeys know why they're stopping them, but they know they have to because it's really when they came to the equation, when they came, they got the lesson because they got pulled away as soon as they tried to do it. So the same thing happens with humans. There's a whole group that will attack groups and stuff like that, and they don't even know why anymore. Yeah, they've been replaced by others. Yeah, and this is just nature. This is human nature, or even just nature in general, because it's a fear of the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. All I know is I can't do that. Interesting. Same thing with speech, with law, and all that kind of stuff. Lawyers were slapped on the hand. Yeah. You got to be vaxxed. Don't bring the subject up. You're licensed. Doctors, police officers, military. Yep. Every single institution that we have that's meant to protect the average person that happened to them. The same type of thing that happened to the monkeys. They don't know why they can't talk about vaccine, but if they do, they're in trouble. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Well, if you followed, so the experiment that I was talking about, they talked about removing the spoiler. The actors. And then once they had everybody who was compliant, they removed the actors, and then they said everybody's complying. Now,
if you extrapolate, like how difficult would it be from a practical standpoint? And this is like, we have 5 minutes left before we have to go. But I play with this kind of stuff in my head sometimes, because I think you've heard of the Great Reset, right? And resets, like
it's right there
through history. Yeah, right.
There.
Yeah, right. I think that we've been through multiple resets, and I think that they reconstitute our history. They rewrite our history to align with whatever narrative they want. And they're kind of lazy about it. But like you described with the monkeys, right? Like the monkeys were replaced systematically until no monkeys there were originally there when they were sprayed, but they continued to do the ritual of not touching the banana. And I think that we have been like, how practically difficult would it be if you wanted to take over a continent or something like that, or whatever? It would be more difficult now. But could you kill all the adults and then bring in kids who have never, who are very impressionable, kill the ones who aren't impressionable, keep the ones who are impressionable, and then run an entire society and just wait for it to be filled up with skeptics and then kill them all again? Like, not to say that I believe that that's happening over and over again, but I think it's very plausible, maps well to the inconsistencies in a whole bunch of stories that we've been told. And it's like, we do things because we've been told that we're not allowed, or we don't do things because we've been told we're not allowed. And the answers for why we're not allowed are kind of bullshit. It's like, I don't think so. And there's a whole bunch of examples of that, but it's like, again, like the 60th parallel, we're not allowed, all of the countries in the world agreed we're not allowed to go past the 60th parallel to explore for reasons. And like, the reasons are kind of bullshit. So again, it's just one of those things where like, I think these microcosms that we're witnessing, and like the Great Reset being talked about, et cetera, I think these things have happened in the past, not exactly as it's happening now, but I think that our history is full of mystery. How's that?
Absolutely. But I think we are abused. Okay. We're going through a type of abuse. And
yes, we are.
Where I think that Theo Fleury is bang on. I think his effort to attack adult mental illness and trauma is absolutely where we should be putting our efforts, because as long as we are weak and unwilling to fight, or scared or fear driven, we're not going to have the dissidents that can stand up. Like an example is what we see with Barbara Leach, Pat King, and other trials is now nobody wants to stand up and be a leader.
Yep.
When it comes to a protest,
King
nobody wants to identify themselves as a leader.
Pat King was not, and I mean, I have nothing but respect for Pat King and like his shows, what he was doing before the convoy, and like I think they did him dirty on the convoy. I got messages from people I didn't know, people who are longtime fans of mine. Come down, you got to come to Ottawa. It's the Freedom Convoy. Come down to Ottawa. I think they wanted to make it January 6th. I think they wanted to load as many people, as many like freedom fighters, people who see what's going on and who aren't obedient. And I think they wanted to smack them, and like they wanted to come down like a ton of bricks. They haven't given Tamara Lich her verdict yet, or no verdict yet. Yeah. No verdict yet. Okay, so some of them have the verdict, but they haven't been sentenced. Some of them have the verdict,
Pat,
and Pat hasn't been sentenced yet. I think they want to throw Tamara Lich in jail, and they're waiting to see. Like, I think they want to throw her in there for 10 years. I think Trudeau was pushing for it, like in 23, and I think they were like, well, the winds are kind of changing, so we're gonna hold off and see what happens after the next election. And that's what I think. That's why I think Tamara Lich's trial the sentencing is next year, and maybe Pat King. But I think they did Pat King dirty with regards to calling him a leader of the convoy. At best, he was a road captain. He had nothing to do with anything, as far as I understand it, downtown Ottawa. He was there, but that's it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the Crown would disagree with you, and I think the judge disagrees with you too. But
sure.
I watched that trial, and what Pat was convicted of is having 300,000 followers.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
That's what he's convicted of.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't think that he did anything wrong, illegal, mischiefy. And this whole use of mischief as a catch-all, when you've got people walking into LCBOs and walking out with hundreds of or thousands of dollars worth of liquor, and you've got pro-Palestinian riots are the same as the Black Lives Matter riots, are the same as the rail blockades in 2017-18. These are government-funded, approved chaos, because they want to shut down the chaos and bring order from chaos. And they want to say the people doing the chaos are the alt-right. And because of that, we're going to have these new laws or whatever. But yeah, I think that's why why we're seeing kind of the movements that we're seeing. But I don't trust our institutions. I don't trust our police. I don't trust the RCMP. I don't trust CSIS. I don't trust the Toronto police. I don't trust the OPP. I don't trust, I don't know how you could trust the institute. I don't trust the Supreme Court. I don't trust the Ontario Supreme Court. I don't trust the Alberta Supreme Court. I don't know how you could at this point in time. So like the best way to avoid any of that is just to avoid being caught up in it, which is very difficult, especially when they're trying to criminalize being skeptical on the internet, right? Like,
yeah, I had Karen Mossad on, and she worked on the Hategate.
Yeah, that was wonderful work too. Yeah.
Yeah, and when I had her on, I said, I actually have an opinion here. I am actually more proud of the authorities after reading your report. And she was kind of surprised. I said, I'm actually more optimistic now. And she's like, well, how'd you come up with that? I said, because half of them actually didn't believe it. So at least there's some of them in there that actually didn't believe it and were trying to fight. They didn't win. The other half that was pushing the narrative won. But at least there's some, now we know there's some of them that are trying to fight this, or at least have a good head on their shoulders. So that brought me some optimism that it's not the entire organization. It's about half. And when I talk to people from the Ottawa Police Services, because I'm covering the Detective Helen Gruss matter, it's actually about 80% support for her and 20% against.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of support for her because she did the right thing. But she's still being prosecuted by just a few at the top. So I would push back a little bit and say have a little bit of hope that the ones that need to stand up, the whistleblowers, the ones that know best, will. And I think as long as we choose to support that group instead of saying the whole system's bad, let's find those ones and support them and make sure that they know that we got their back. If you're going to be a whistleblower, we'll take care of you.
But the whistleblower laws are terrible in Canada. Terrible.
Correct. They got rid of a bunch of them, as you might have noticed. We also had propaganda laws they got rid of. You should have, the media funds started paying for state media. We should have been paying closer attention to that.
We should have been. 2012, Obama allowed the United States to start lying to people, then Sandy Hook.
Yep. Well, there's another whole show right there. But what I want to leave you on, Mark, is don't give up. Okay, don't give up. There are still a lot of people fighting. You won't hear their names. It's not going to be in CBC because they're not going to touch it. But don't give up. There's some good ones even in the RCMP in here, Alberta. There's some good ones in CSIS. It's not the majority, but they might get there.
I'm going to try not to give up. My opinion, what I think, and I'm not, to make sure everybody understands me, I'm not advocating for violence or anything to that effect, but I think that our government is corrupt to the point, and our institutions are corrupt to the point that trying to fix them is a fool's errand. And I think that probably mass arrests and tribunals, if we stick with the Westminster system, replace it with maybe a draw, like maybe all the truckers, I don't know, 338 names out of a hat would be better than the 338 who are in there now, in my opinion. No experience necessary. You know what I mean? Like the first people who ran this country didn't have a long history of being parliamentarians and, writing laws and things like that. They just did what they thought was best for the country. And at this point in time, the people in charge, the small group of people against Gruss, and the small group of people who won because they were pushing the narrative, and the small group of people at the top, the NDP are 5% and the Liberals are 20%? That group of people, I don't even think they're 20%, but that group of people are corrupt to the point where we need to clean them out. And the only way to do it is not use it. You can't take communists to a communist court and expect justice. And I think that's where we're at. I think that's where we're at. And I think we need to fix it. And I think that if we don't fix it, like if we don't look this monster in the eye and address this monster fearlessly, then we are going to sentence our children to more of this madness. And that's not fair. And we should damn well stand up for ourselves and for our country, in my opinion.
God bless you, Mark, and keep doing what you're doing, like shows like this and getting out there and doing your posts and stuff like that. Keep doing what you're doing. And yes, even push people like me. And if I block you, call me out.
I will, man. I will. Okay, so
that was beneficial to me, by the way, because I'm still growing, I'm still learning. So
we all are.
For that.
We all are, and I'm still trying to do better as well. Because jeepers creepers, I'm sure that there's a couple more thousand people who'd be interested in seeing my show. All right, well, thanks for being on, Jason. I appreciate it. We'll have to do this again, and I guess Speaking Moistly is back, so look out for more Speaking Moistly. If you want to be on Speaking Moistly, reach out, and we'll figure it out, set it up. And thanks for coming today, Jason. Hang out for a minute. I'm just going to stop the recording. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.